Part 33. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 321. Chapter 321 Blow on Your Fingertips. Huo Linyuan looked at Lan Min. In fact, he thought there was nothing wrong with this Lan Min before. He felt that women in business marriages were just like tools, not as lively as Lan Min. Biting out of the so-called business marriage for the woman in front of me. But now Huo Linyuan began to waver. If a business marriage is not possible for a family like theirs, then why have they still chosen business marriage for so many years? Lan Min, don't mess around. When Lan Min heard this, his body became cold. That kind of indescribable coolness. At this time, Lan Min had an idea in his mind. If it were Li Baikan now, then he might stand behind her without any scruples. And severely punish the person who came up with this idea. When this idea appeared in Lan Zhi's mind, it really shocked her. Why do you always think like this? Obviously she doesn't love Li Baikan and only regards him as her brother. Why do she still have such thoughts? Huo Linyuan frowned when he heard Lan Min's words. After all, Lan Min is also his beloved woman, so she cannot ignore his thoughts. So Huo Linyuan planned to get up at this time. At this moment, Huo Linyuan's cell phone rang. After answering the call, Huo Linyuan's somewhat unhappy expression immediately improved. Immediately, he hugged Lan Min into his arms and kissed her hard several times. There is no end to the road. There is a way. There is a way to make Li Baikan pay the price. The reason why Li Baikan supports Sunian so much. I just hope that Sunian will follow Sun Ying'er and then have no energy to knit that sweater. Unexpectedly, Sunian would stay up all night knitting. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Li Baikan stood at the door of the room, looking at the woman inside who was still knitting seriously, and felt a headache. He pushed the door open and went in. It's so late, so don't knit. It's not good for your health. Sunian, who was busy weaving, suddenly heard this and was pricked in the hand so hard that he couldn't help but scream in pain. Ouch, why did this Li Baikan appear like a ghost? It scared me. Li Baikan quickly came to Sunian's side and held her hand directly. Does it hurt? It was only then that he saw that Sunian's hands were all red. Now Li Baikan was worried. How come your hands are like this? You are just knitting a sweater, so why are you poking your hands like this? And why are you poking your hands like this? You are still knitting a sweater. Sunian. What are these words? Why do you feel like I am like this, like a fool? This made Sunian couldn't help but secretly roll his eyes. Knitting is such a boring thing, it's normal for me to be lazy and distracted from time to time, okay. If this guy Li Baikan were to come here, he would definitely be worse off than me. But just when Sunian was complaining, her body stiffened. The reason for this was that Li Baikan was lowering his head and blowing gently on her fingers. Through the vaguely visible brows and eyes, Sunian could feel the seriousness in Li Baikan's eyes. This made Sunian want to take back his hand. But at this moment, her hand was held by Li Baikan, so she couldn't make the decision at all. The warm wind blew gently on her fingertips. They say that 10 fingers are connected to the heart. I don't know if it's an illusion, but it even made Sunian feel a little warmer in his heart. Why are you so anxious? Even if you want to see the old man happy, you won't be so anxious. After all, the old man will definitely feel distressed when he sees your hands like this. Li Baikan was originally planning how to deal with Sunian's only by showing off in front of him. Can Sunian knit a sweater for him? Now he feels that he can change his mind. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 322. Chapter 322 Why does Li Baikan feel like an old man? As Li Baikan raised his head, Sunian could see the distress in his eyes. Sunian looked at this look. He didn't know why, but he couldn't question it. She said, ha ha ha, that's because I am very half-hearted. If something is not done in one breath, then I may forget it. Think about it, I spent so long just because of this sweater. If I forget about it due to other things, wouldn't the injury to my finger be in vain? You know, it hurts to have your fingers connected to your heart. So you know it hurts. I thought you didn't know it hurts. Lee Baiken didn't expect Sunian to say this reason, it's okay even if I forgot recently. Just do it when you remember it, and give it as often as you want. Lee Baiken felt that he could change his mind. Confuse Sunian and make Sunian forget about this matter. Then he wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable seeing Sunian knitting a sweater for the old man, and Sunian wouldn't have to be so tired. This is a good idea. Sunian really wanted to roll his eyes. Does this guy not understand human language? I have already told you not to forget, and you still say this. Lee Baiken picked up the hand that held her fingertips and said, believe it or not, if you give it away like this, if the old man sees your fingers like this, he won't be able to wear them at all. Sunian was stunned because he didn't know how to wear it. Don't tell me how much the old man loves you. If he knew that you poked your hands like this to knit a sweater, do you think the old man would wear it? Don't you give things to make the old man happy instead of giving him something to wear? It's uncomfortable, Lee Baiken whispered in her ear in a low voice and did not stop rubbing her hand. When Sunian heard this, he looked at Lee Baiken's hand that was rubbing him. What Lee Baiken said does make sense. If the old man knew that my hand was injured, he would be happy, but he would not wear it. Fortunately, this guy Lee Baiken reminded me, can't I just wait a few days after knitting? After all, this is just a wound caused by accidentally poking my hand with a stick, not an embroidery needle. It will take a long time to heal. Maybe my hands will not be red tomorrow morning. Such a simple thing. Lee Baiken. He continued without giving up, and it's not a problem for you to stay up late. Staying up late is very harmful to the body. Sunian couldn't help but yawned loudly after listening to Lee Baiken's words. Why haven't I noticed that Lee Baiken is so nagging before? He is as nagging as an old lady, and what's the point of staying up late? I stay up late every day to catch up on dramas, watch live broadcasts, and then go to the lounge to catch up on sleep during the day. Ha ha ha, why do I feel like Lee Baiken is an old man? Ahem, cough, cough, you can't think like that. If you think like that, wouldn't I become a pervert who preys on the elderly? You can't think like that. Perhaps Sunian was really too sleepy, so she fell asleep leaning on Lee Baiken's arms while mumbling. Lee Baiken, who didn't hear Sunian's thoughts, lowered his head and found that the person was asleep, and let out a long sigh. Then he carefully put the person on the bed. He found that what this woman decided she wanted to do would never stop no matter what. For example, knitting a sweater for the old man, or giving birth to a child named Mo. Lee Baiken sighed, then went to the bathroom to get a hot towel and applied it carefully to her hands. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 323. Chapter 323 Bidding Fair. Tendering meeting for city image. Sunian must go to such a crucial meeting, of course. After all, this is related to the future direction of the Lee Group and even the city. Sunian was originally thinking about what he should say to get Lee Baiken to agree. After all, on such an important occasion, Lee Baiken would definitely be suspected if he didn't give him a perfect excuse. But I didn't expect that Lee Baiken would take her initiative to take her there. There was no chance for her to mention it. This made Sunian couldn't help but look at Lee Baiken a few more times on the way to the venue. At the first glance, Sunian discovered something. The color of Lee Baiken's tie today. Why is this guy's tie the same color as my skirt, both dark purple? Is it such a coincidence? Hearing this, Lee Baiken moved closer to her without leaving any trace. It also allows Sunian to see his tie more clearly. After all, she had been looking at it for so long, and she didn't realize it until now. This reminds me of something I saw in an idol drama where the male protagonist wears a tie in the same color as the heroine's skirt in order to match the heroine's skirt. Convenient to show affection. That's right, Lee Baiken had this idea. He felt that a lot of things needed to be done to slowly make Sunian feel that he was changing for her. Not the stupid Lee Baiken before. Ha ha ha, although this is a coincidence, Lan Zhen must not know about the coincidence. Lan Zhen will definitely feel very uncomfortable when he sees this scene. Sunian reached out and took Lee Baiken's arm, and said with a smile on his face, "Baiken, why are your tie and mine the same color today? Does this prove that the two of us are in tune with each other now? The color of my tie from now on will be determined by the color of your skirt." The smile on Sunian's face suddenly froze. Lee Baiken lowered his head and kissed the corner of her mouth. Is this really a bit flirty? How about I try wearing Barbie Death Pink tomorrow? Hee, since Lee Baiken has said it, I will never let this opportunity go. Really? Death Barbie fan? Lee Baiken was a little confused when he heard these words, but seeing how interested Sunian was, the color must be very unique. But unique is unique, as long as she is happy. Since I said it, of course it is true. These words successfully brought an even bigger smile to Sunian's face. Arrived at the convention and exhibition center. People from various companies have arrived. In fact, all companies have submitted their design plans. Now it is time to make the final statement, conquer everyone, and get the lowest bid. Situations like this are usually when the heroine shines. Let the whole world witness how awesome the heroine is. This is why Sunian was not surprised at all when he saw Lan Min next to Huo Linyuan. However, Sunian felt that she was a female supporting role and did not need to be in the limelight, so she arranged for someone from the company who was more eloquent to make the final presentation. After sitting down again, Sunian, who has always been calm and collected, is a little impatient. Because if she wanted to help Lee win this bid, she had to change the trajectory of her previous life. This plot can also be regarded as a somewhat important plot for the entire book. Now if we want to change this plot, we don't know what the consequences will be. But Sunian has no choice. If this matter is not changed, the Lee group will be in a lot of trouble when it comes into her hands. So she has to do this. Just when Sunian was confused, he suddenly felt his hand being held. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 324. Chapter 324. The heroine is not the finale. Sunian looked at Lee Baiken beside him. Lee Baiken didn't say anything, just gave her a smile. Although it was just a simple smile, Sunian's heart was completely settled. Yeah, why am I anxious? I am a reborn person now. Today I will win this bid, and later I will go to show off my power in front of the heroine Lanji. There is no way, I am such a tacky heroine. Lee Baiken played with her fingertips carelessly. For Lee Baiken, he almost knew the result. After all, he had bought Fang Yulan in advance. He knows better than anyone how much Lanji weighs. Sunian will definitely win this round. Then each company began to make a description. Since the Lee group was at the bottom, Sunian felt drowsy while listening to it. If you are tired, just lean on my shoulder and sleep for a while. I will call you when you come to our company. Lee Baiken put the person in his arms and said warmly. Sunian yawned deeply when he heard this. Forget it, after all, it won't look good if I fall asleep on such an important occasion. and Lan Min's eyes were always on her. Sun Yan felt that if she really fell asleep, Lan Zhen would want to burn a hole in her body with his eyes. Ha ha ha, Li Baikan really deserves to be the heroine's white moonlight-licking dog. Now he is so intimate with me that the heroine can't bear it. The following is the description of the Huo group. Hearing this, Sun Yan raised his eyebrows. Because usually in situations like this, the heroine is the finale. Why did you come out so early? Sun Yan looked towards the stage and saw Lan Min wearing a high-end custom-made women's suit. This made Sun Yan sneer in his heart. Humph, you are worthy of being a heroine. If my guess is correct, this heroine may not be able to stand me being with her licking dog if she comes up so early, and wants to quickly hit me with her heroine's brilliance. The face of this vicious female supporting character. Thinking of this, Sun Yan looked at Lan Min. The two women's eyes met in the air. Countless electric flashes. Sun Yan raised his eyebrows. The heroine is still looking here at such a critical moment. If I don't do something, then I will bear the reputation of this vicious heroine in vain. Since the heroine Lan Min is looking here with such concern, if I kiss the spare tire that she cares about at this time, will she be upset? Thinking of this, he turned around and prepared to kiss Li Baikan. But just as she turned her head, Li Baikan kissed her. And it's not just a simple kiss, it's a long and delicate kiss. Such a scene, of course, fell into Lan Min's eyes. Lan Min almost broke his teeth. The key is that she clearly saw that it was Li Baikan who took the initiative to kiss Sun Yan. Yes, it was Li Baikan who took the initiative. This is what makes Lan Min feel uncomfortable. But as soon as she thought about it, she was happy. Because it won't be long before she lets Li Baikan see Sun Yan's true face clearly and how fake this woman's face is. Then Lan Min cleared her throat, and then began to talk about the plan in her hand. After Li Baikan ended the kiss, he wanted to see the shy expression on Sun Yan's face. Although Sun Yan only showed a little unconsciously every time, just that little bit made him happy. But when he heard the plan mentioned by Lan Zhen, the expression on his face suddenly froze. Then he looked at Lan Min on the stage in disbelief. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 325. Chapter 325. Sun Yan, who said our plans are exactly the same. The reason why Li Baikan had such a big reaction. It's because the plan that Lan Meng talked about on stage was Fang Yulan's plan. Why? He gave Fang Yulan a large amount of money and completely bought out her plan. And repeatedly warned Fang Yulan not to have contact with Huo Linyuan or Lan Min. Why did this plan still appear? Isn't it possible to change even after doing so much? While Lan Min was talking, he was actually looking at Li Baikan and Sun Yan from the corner of his eye. She saw Li Baikan's performance. It proves that you are successful. After finishing speaking, Lan Min's topic suddenly changed. Everyone, what I mentioned above is Huo's plan. In addition, for this plan, I am most grateful to my good sister Fang Yulan. It was with her help that I was able to think of such a plan. Unparalleled creativity. I am here to let the whole world know that this is her creativity and her hard work, and cannot be bought by some people with money. After Lan Min finished speaking so righteously, everyone became interested. You must know that the people who can do this are not simple people, so they smelled a big drama when they heard this. Lan Jian thought that after she said this, Sun Yan would definitely be anxious and panicked, just like a lost dog. It is also for this reason that Lan Min looked at Sun Yan while talking. Just so that you don't miss Sun Yan's expression. But who knew that Sun Yan was sitting on Diao Tai, as if it was none of her business. This made Lan Min anxious, because she wanted to reveal the true face of Sun Yan, a hypocritical woman. So Lan Zhen looked directly at Sun Yan. Miss Su, I didn't expect you to be able to sit still. If my guess is correct, the plan you submitted must be exactly the same as mine. Sun Yan. This guy is really too direct. Is this the legendary simplicity and unpretentiousness? Since Lan Min was so direct, how could Sunian not fight? Ms. Nalan, do you mean that I plagiarized? Lan Ji smiled and said, it's two identical designs. Can't you tell at a glance who has the problem? Sunian stood up and walked towards Lan Min step by step. Who told you that your plan and mine are exactly the same, and I copied it from you? This made Lan Min's pupils shrink, but she quickly calmed down, because Huo Linyuan's news was definitely correct. The Li group bought the plan from Fang Yulan and told Fang Yulan that she could not tell it, and also gave Fang Yulan a large sum of money. It was also for this reason that she gave up her own design plan and used Fang Yulan's plan, and say it before Li Shi. You must know that if there are two similar plans, then the first one must have it, and the later one must have it through improper means. Haha, Sunian, you are also a smart person. You should also know that quibbling here is a stupid thing. Your plan has been handed over to the organizing committee. I just want the organizing committee to come up with your plan. Then you can use things obtained through unfair means can be made public. Sunian must have been confused when he saw Lan Min like this. I have only had brief contact with this Fang Yulan. Why is this guy so sure that I plagiarized? My plan is also different. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 326. Chapter 326 Sunian, if you apologize now, there is still room for redemption. After Lan Yan finished speaking, staff members came up immediately. Hand prepare the projection equipment. As if he wanted to announce Sunian's story to the public. Sunian, if you apologize now, there is still room for redemption. Lan Min put away his previous expression and put on a gentle look. This look made Sunian to feel that the person in front of him really looked like a bodhisattva. Why should I apologize? This planning project is related to the future image of the city. It should incorporate the efforts of designers. Only in this way can we create a perfect design, instead of using other people's efforts to pass off as our own design and rely on this design to gain something that is not originally ours. My own glory. When he said this, Lan Min paused. If someone does this, they will definitely get the punishment they deserve. Lan Min's words successfully made Sunian laugh. But anyone who is familiar with Sunian can feel that she is angry. Sunian, Lan Min, you are making accusations here. You might as well look at your design and your planning more carefully. Then you may be able to find that your design has huge design flaws. This flaw may bring disaster to the whole city. What are you talking about? Don't change the subject. Why am I digressing the topic? If this design has huge design flaws, then why should I use it? Even if I use it, I will make corrections and find the best solution based on this. Li Baikan also sat up straight. Design flaw? He did not notice this. At this time, Li Baikan thought that there were some differences between the two designs. Even if we say they are similar, we can only say that their frameworks are similar. Seeing Sunian's current state, he definitely realized that he might have done too much. Sunian had originally imagined that Lan Min would come up with Fang Yulan's plan. In other words, she originally planned to confront Lan Min directly. When he thought of this, Li Baikan smiled slightly. It seemed that all the things he did were in vain. This little woman had already thought of everything. If you don't believe it, then put our two plans on the big screen and I'll tell you. Sunian's eyes were filled with anger. This heroine is really arrogant. If I don't smash her face into pieces, then I'm not a vicious heroine. Haha, in my last life, I suffered a lot because of Fang Yulan's design. I have been studying it for how long? Who can be more familiar with it than me? Hearing Sunian's thoughts, Li Baikan was a little confused. Because even if Huo wins the bid and their company loses the opportunity, it cannot suffer a loss. Does this mark affect what happens next? But the next moment, Li Baikan's expression changed. Forget it, there are loopholes in this design. There were loopholes in this design. In the previous life, the heroine's first reaction was to ask Li to take over MD, she was out of the limelight in the end. She asked me to take over because she was Li Baikan's beloved. She had accumulated so much money in the previous life. There is so much resentment this time. This vicious female supporting character must give this guy a good slap in the face and avenge me for the revenge of my previous life. Li Baikan, it was his fault again for a long time. Okay, let me see what flaws Sunian can tell. When Lan Min said this, the smile on his face became gentler. Sunian even felt that a holy light appeared on Lan Min's head. It is the aperture of the Angel of the West. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 327. Chapter 327. Let's finish it first. Let's talk about the consequences. Your design is very good, in terms of meaning, cost, and image, but what about your waterproofing and water pipes? This question confused Lan Zhen. After all, she took this design directly from Fang Yulan. And what she said was also written by Fang Yulan for her. She doesn't know this at all. Sunian picked up the demonstration pole next to him and pointed to the bottom of the sculpture. Everyone, please look here. About 20 meters below here is the pipeline area that connects the nearby business districts. Indeed, when we built this image sculpture, we didn't need to digging so deep, but think about the weight of this sculpture and the various large-scale machinery that will slowly crush the pipe during construction, what the cost will be. These words made Li Baikan sit up straight. You must know that the main industry of the Li Group is real estate, so of course he will be involved in these. I also understand what the consequences will be if these things happen. And you didn't discover this, and you won't discover this in the future, so you have to investigate bit by bit and dig bit by bit. You must know that this location represents the image of our entire city. Do you think that by then, if this area is dug up, what will happen? Will there be much public opinion? You have no idea how many people's lives it has affected and how many people are pointing their fingers at you and scolding you. Sunian's body was shaking when he said these words. Because these were her personal experiences in her previous life. All public opinion is on her and attacks her. As for the reason, it's just that she is a vicious female supporting character, so Lan Min can unite with the directors and use the reason that she is Li Baikan's beloved woman to let the old guys on the board of directors force the Li Group to take over her mess. And if she can't think of a good way to solve the problem, then she should use this reason to step down. In her last life, she spent a lot of time redesigning, finding the best way, and modifying the original plan to create a perfect solution. This is why she didn't win over Fang Yulan to her side in this life. Thinking of the suffering she had suffered in her previous life, she became very angry. Me Lan Min kept retreating. Since it was Lan Min's opportunity for revenge, Sunian would be a fool if he didn't cherish it properly. As for the consequences, let's finish it first and then talk about the consequences. So Lan Min kept regretting it, and Sunian kept moving forward. Why didn't you say it? If you don't say it, then it's up to me at this point. Sunian turned around and looked at the stage. He lowered his hand. Now, on behalf of the Li Group, I will introduce our design plan. Our sculptures are based on local humanistic characteristics and fully consider the surrounding. Li Baikan watched Sunian speak with ease on the stage, with confidence all over her body, as if the world should be crawling at her feet. She seemed to be standing at the center of light in the world at this moment. It makes people unable to take their eyes away. But Li Baikan's heart was hurting so much that he couldn't breathe. Because he heard Sunian's inner voice. In this life, I will not let this heroine force me to take over and pay for her faults because she is the beloved woman of this guy Lee Baiken. I will not let the guys on the board of directors use this excuse to force me into the palace. Lee Baiken closed his eyes. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 328. Chapter 328. Don't be afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of the worst. Sunian's words, what else could be the final result? Huo Linyuan, who was sitting in the audience, also realized that he had been fooled and fell into Lee Baiken's smoke bomb. If he guessed correctly, then they would have already thought of how to respond and how to attack. Huo Linyuan directly crushed the cup in his hand. Sunian on the stage had no intention of stopping at all. The sculptures you designed are really ridiculous. Heart is your name, so you design a heart on the main sculpture. How much contribution do you have to the city? Only then can you represent the city. No matter from the design point of view, you are still messed up about these details. Tell me why I should use this design and why I should steal it. These words succeeded in making Lan Min fall down all of a sudden. Her face was pale now. Sunian was completely happy. Then there was applause. Amidst the applause, Sunian walked towards Lee Baiken with a smile on his face. Wait until they walked in front of Lee Baiken. She noticed that Lee Baiken's face looked strange. Then I thought about it, Lan Min was like this, so how could Lee Baiken not feel distressed? Wow, I feel even more happy now. Not only did I get my revenge from my previous life, but I also made Lee Baiken and Lan Min feel uncomfortable at the same time. But the next moment, Sunian was held in Lee Baiken's arms. I didn't expect you to be so outstanding. It really opened my eyes. Now I really feel that you are the most outstanding woman in the world. I am really lucky to be by your side. Lee Baiken suppressed all emotions. After all, what Sunian wants to hear now is praise. He cannot let his emotions affect her or dampen her interest. Sunian snorted after listening to Lee Baiken's words. These compliments are really vulgar and have no sincerity at all. But the corners of her mouth could not help but raise. Ahem, after all, who doesn't like to be praised? At night, Lee's study was filled with the smell of cigarette smoke. And Lee Baiken sat in the smoke and meditated. He is reviewing recent events. He found it. Huo Linyuan noticed what he was doing, and then found out about Fang Yulan. He learned about his plan to buy her out from Fang Yulan, so he thought that Sunian was using Fang Yulan's plan, so he came here just to get Sunian disgraced. But Lee Baiken is not concerned about this. Rather, he prevented Fang Yulan and Lan Min from contacting each other, but in the end they still came into contact. Does this mean that something that should happen must happen? For example, he will die. Lee Baiken subconsciously held his hand when he thought of this. No, everything can be changed. If Huo's bid was successful in the previous life, wouldn't the bid be in their hands now? Even if he can't change the fact that he will die by then, this design project is already in the hands of their company. In the future, he will definitely not be as constrained by Huo Linyuan as in the so-called previous life, and Sunian's life will be easier in the future. Lee Baiken chuckled lightly, and then put out the cigarette in his hand. He felt he had to do something. Although Lee Baiken is not willing to give in, and he does not think that he will die according to the so-called fate, but as the saying goes, if you are not afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of the worst. He felt that he needed to guard against this eventuality. Lee Baiken made a phone call and went out. Josu, help me contact a lawyer, I want to make a will. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 329. Chapter 329. Lee Baikin actually has a sweater. Josu was confused when he received the news. You must know that he can be said to be by Lee Baikin's side all the time, and he knows Lee Baikin's body better than anyone else. Why did you make a will suddenly? With a confused mood, he watched Lee Baikin and the lawyer draw up the will. A will is simple. If anything happens to him, his wife will inherit everything. Even videotaping and writing. After the lawyer left, Lee Baikin saw that Josu was hesitant to speak, so he smiled and said, "Ask whatever you want to ask." Josu swallowed. "Mr. Lee, I know how you feel about your wife, but the will is a bit too much. I don't think your wife is unreliable, I just think your health is so good, how could there be a problem? Don't be afraid of 10,000, just be afraid of the worst. If nothing happens to me, then this will be just a piece of waste paper. If something happens to me, then the overall situation can be stabilized as much as possible." Lee Baikin said. Here he looked at Josu, "You are the closest person to me. If there is such a day, then I hope you can help her prove that this will is true." With Josu, if such a day comes, the situation in the dream will not happen again. Josu looked at the person in front of him. People outside said that Lee Baikin was cold and ruthless, and his methods were ruthless, but who would have thought that such a man could actually be a lover? Josu felt that if she were a woman, she might not be able to control herself. No, it should be said that he is a little unable to control himself now. Author, whatever you want to do, don't mess around ahem, it's okay to mess around. After doing all this, Lee Baikin felt much more relaxed. No matter what is going on in this life, the only thing he can guarantee is that this life will not be as miserable as the so-called previous life. That's enough, isn't it? Lee Baikin came to Sunian relaxedly. Before he said anything, Sunian held a box in front of him. "Baikin, take a look, do you like it?" The sudden box made Lee Baikin a little stunned. "A gift for me?" "Yes, do you like what I heard?" "Of course it's a gift for you," Sunian said with a smile on his face. Lee Baikin took the box, his heart in his throat. As he opened it, a black sweater appeared in front of him. He recognized this sweater. It was the second sweater she had knitted in the past few days. Winter is coming soon. Although this sweater is not a big brand, it is still my favorite. If you like it, then wear it. It will definitely help you have a warm winter." Sunian said this. "Sometimes, I feel weird." "What am I talking about?" "When I gave it to him, it was obvious that I was giving him face, as if I was begging him to wear it. I didn't think about it, and I did too. This is not a trick on you, this is your size. If you don't believe me, you can try it on yourself." When Lee Baikin saw the sweater, his first reaction was that Sunian gave him the sweater for the old man. Even so, he was very happy. After all, he had been depressed for so long before. Now that I heard this, I couldn't help but be surprised. How could I not even know the size of the person I love? Haha, I personally took charge of this guy's funeral in my last life. I don't know what size it is. I even know its length. Lee Baikin. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. John Word. Chapter 330. Chapter 330. The Happy Old Man. Despite this, Lee Baikin still stretched out his hand to hold Sunian in his arms. "Actually, I have been very jealous when I saw you knitting sweaters for the old man these days. I am not afraid of your jokes. I once thought childishly that I would take advantage of you when you weren't paying attention. These sweaters are ruined. After all, I don't own one, so why does the old man have one? But when I think about your hard work for so many days, I can't bear to part with it." At this moment, Lee Baikin really felt that the blood in his body was hot. These words made Sunian think of it. Li Baikan seems to be in meetings all the time these days and busy with various things. Is this the reason? Sunian wanted to laugh when he thought of this. Oh, hashtag, I just thought it was for the old man. If I didn't give it to this guy, it wouldn't look good, so I made one by the way. No matter what the reason was, Li Baikan was very happy. After all, this was done stitch by Sunian. To him, these are the most unique clothes in the world. Thank you, Sunian. You're welcome. You are my beloved man, and I am very happy to make clothes for my beloved man, Sunian said with a smile. After all, she had endured all the hard work, and she still had to say what she should say. After holding Sunian in his arms for a while. Start trying on clothes. It is indeed his size and fits him perfectly. The pure black sweater worn on his slender body made the whole person feel a bit colder. Sunian, who was next to him, cocked his head and looked at it, but his eyes showed regret. Hey, when I was making this dress, I wanted to put a pattern of flowers and wealth on this guy's chest, but I just felt that if I couldn't make it, then this guy wouldn't be able to wear it, so I gave up because I didn't want to waste my efforts. If Li Baikan really had this pattern on his chest, it would definitely look great. Li Baikan, who was trying on clothes, smiled. If Sunian really made such a pattern, he would definitely wear it. The following few days, everyone in the Li group can see that their president appears in various places wearing a black sweater. Although it is already early autumn, it is not cold at all. There are even female staff wearing summer clothes. That's why Li Baikan is in this situation. It is particularly unique. This has people in the company scratching their heads. Is Li Baikan feeling unwell? However, Josu accidentally explained in the tea room that his wife had made it for Li Baikan, and everyone suddenly realized it. And everyone in the company ate dog food. Li Jianhong immediately rushed to Sunian after learning the news. Although he very much hopes that his son and wife can be harmonious and beautiful. But he wants it too. At least we can't let some brat get too arrogant. However, before Li Jianhong spoke, Sunian took the initiative and handed several boxes to him. Dad, this is the sweater I made for you. I have made 4 pieces for the time being. You can see which one you like. Li Jianhong glanced at the box. What if I like them all? Sunian's face was full of cuteness. That's best, just take them all. This is just for the convenience of you, Dad, to change clothes and knit more. I'm just worried that a few pieces are not very good and you are not satisfied, so I let you pick. Li Jianhong was happy now. Nian, you are indeed the most filial to my father. Ouch, ouch, you are so skillful with your hands. I will have a tea party with those old men tomorrow, and I will wear these clothes. Ha ha ha, after all, they are my daughter-in-law is definitely not as good as my Nian, but when he said this, Li Jianhong remembered the news and asked, how many are there in Baikan? 1 piece, Sunian answered honestly. Li Jianhong was even happier now. Then the company saw the chairman dangling in a sweater. End of this chapter.